Hello, welcome to Chess with Simon. We're reviewing the games from the OCA Cowley Blitz. Next up, DJ Dave versus Gildersleeves. Gildersleeves is a member of Whitney Chess Club and Cowley Blitz. Okay, let's have a look at this game then. E4, C6, Caro defense. Good solid opening, played by many world champions. Botvinnik, Karpov, many others. Knight F3, so this could be hinting at the two knights, maybe. D5, actually exchanging, so transposing towards perhaps an exchange variation. D4, Knight C6, and White decides to go for the Panov Botvinnik attack, so White's accepting an isolated queen's pawn in exchange for attacking chances. Black plays E6. There's really two ways to defend this idea, E6 or G6. And you can play G6 acting against the IQP on D4, or you can play E6, which is a solid move. There is a Fischer game, I think, where Black, one of the Fischer games from early in his career, where Black develops outside the pawn chain. Bishop to G4 is a very sharp game, but more usual is to keep the bishop inside the pawn chain. Now this is an interesting move, isn't it? A3. So this is not the most commonly played move here, but it can be pretty handy because later on that knight on C6 can come to B4 and then install itself on D5. The isolated queen's pawn to sort of blockade the isolated queen's pawn. So there is some logic to A3, and also if the bishop comes to C4, it can find a place to harden A2. So I mean, and also I suppose, more simply with pawn A3 is it just stops the bishop B4 check, and it can transposition into a Nimzo or Bogo Indian type position. Black plays knight F6. Knight C3 is the book move, and we're right back into book now. So we've just transposed into book with this A3 move. Black takes, again this is commonly played. White takes, and as we predicted actually now, this bishop does have A2 available to it. We have got this isolated queen's pawn, and there's no knight B4, knight D5. Black plays bishop D6, which was the engine move. White goes in for the pin, makes sense. Black wants to break it, White retains it, just daring Black to play G5 really. But Black would rather castle, White would castle, so we've got a kind of typical attacking battle here, and we're still in known territory, we're still in known theory. So rook E8 is a new move, and a pretty sensible move, perhaps hinting at pawn E5. Rook E1 is the sort of echoing, putting that rook on an open file. Pawn A6, perhaps B5, perhaps bishop B7, giving the bishop a way out, because obviously the bishop's blocked in by the E6 pawn. And White chooses to intensify the pin on that knight on F6, so attacking the knight again. Clearly Black's got to do something because the knight can't move, and if White takes there, Black's got to take back with a pawn, which is ugly, and opens up the king, so bishop E7 is the logical engine move. Takes, everything gets exchanged off, and I suppose now I would start looking at whether you can get the queen and bishop in a kind of lined up on that diagonal into H7 and delivering checkmate with the queen in front. White starts with rook E4, which turns out to be very useful. The engine doesn't particularly like it, but it is defending that pawn on D4, and it could swing to the king's side to cause trouble. So Black's hitting the bishop as we suspected actually, and then developing it onto the long diagonal, and now the rook's a target. But White sort of says, okay, do your worst. So let's just think. So of course, if Black simply takes on E5, White can take back with the rook. What happens if Black takes on... I suppose if Black takes on D4, then Queen takes, Bishop takes on E4, Queen takes on E4. Right, I just check it with the engine. Look, I'm such a slave to the engine. Queen takes... Oh, there's also Knight D7 hitting the Queen, which is full of fireworks. In fact, Knight D7 hitting the Queen is a better move. Queen takes... Yeah, this is fine. But basically, after Queen takes, the engine's playing AD8. And then Knight D7, who knows what's happening there, it's sort of very complicated. Okay, but anyway, my point really is that this move, knight e5, is a move that opens the door to complexity. I think that's the point. And black plays an interesting, tough move. So knight to a5. So the point is hitting the bishop on b3, although it is defended, and hitting the rook. Rook comes back to double defend the bishop on b3. And now black is attacking that weak pawn, and also pinning the pawn, although not really pinning, because the queen can never take on e5, because even if the pawn takes back, the queen on d1 is defended, and so it would lose an exchange. So it's not really pinning the pawn. Bishop c2, taking the bishop away from that knight, and actually lining up this idea of this battery, which I was talking about, queen d3, bishop c2. The rook thinking about doubling, and here it is. Here it is. The pawn goes in the way to stop it, and now this rook comes in really handy. This rook development actually comes to fruition. So now we've got 4 pieces aiming at that pawn on g6, which is defended twice, which does rather suggest a sacrifice is in the air. Black defends the pawn with the king, I suppose, hoping that it's all going to work out. Maybe white won't sacrifice, maybe the sacrifice isn't sound, but the engine likes to sacrifice, and Djdave likes to sacrifice, and the sacrifice has happened, and it's forking the king and the queen. So after the knight took, was there a way out? Well, you know, the engine wants to take on d4, but that does give white a discovered check. I think for a human, what would I play? It's ever so hard, because wherever the king goes, it's walking into a discovered check. And there's a lot of squares it can't go to, but there's a lot of discovered checks on the board. It's just really hard. So it's natural to take that. But once you've taken here, then queen takes, check. It's not forced mate, but it is won. And so Gildersleeves felt it was the right time to resign. And next we will look at one of Gildersleeves' games.